There's a Masonic symbol you've seen your whole life and probably never noticed. It's on the $1 bill, an all-seeing eye above a pyramid. What does it mean, and why is it there? Some say it's a clue that this secret society has been controlling power for centuries. And the craziest part is that 15 US presidents have been Freemasons. The legend of the treasure isn't just a made-up story. It's filled with symbols, real details, and secrets we didn't understand as kids. Today I'm going to tell you what no one explains about the Freemasons, what they're hiding, why they're associated with darkness, or why so many of the world's most powerful men have been Freemasons. Ben shouldn't be there, but he needs to know what no one wants to tell him. He rummages through boxes, papers, anything. He's looking for a clue until he finds an old book. What if his family really is keeping a secret? His grandfather catches him, but he doesn't get mad. He decides it's time to tell him the family legacy. In 1832, only one of the men who signed the most important document in US history was still alive, the Declaration of Independence. His name was Charles Carroll, and he knew he was dying. He had been keeping a secret for years, and he couldn't die with it. He had to pass it on to someone he could trust. At midnight, he woke up his stable boy and ordered him to take him to the White House. He had to see the president, Andrew Jackson. But when they arrived, the president wasn't there, and Carroll couldn't wait any longer. So he told the only person in front of him, his stable boy, Thomas Gates, Ben's ancestor. And what was the secret? The existence of a treasure far greater than anyone could imagine. A treasure that sparked wars, that passed from civilization to civilization, until one day it vanished. More than 1,000 years later, in Jerusalem, a group of knights found it again. It was hidden beneath the Temple of Solomon. And when they saw it, they knew it couldn't belong to just one man, not even a king. They removed it from Jerusalem, took it to Europe, and formed a secret order, the Knights Templar. For centuries, they protected it, until, in time, they created a new brotherhood, the Freemasons. The network grew until it reached America. There, some of its members were George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and Paul Revere. And when the American Revolutionary War broke out, they knew the treasure was at risk. So they did the only thing they could: hide it. They left clues, maps, and secret codes. Over time, almost all the clues were lost. One by one, they were forgotten, until only one remained. That was the one Charles Carroll entrusted to young Thomas Gates. A single phrase: the secret lies with Charlotte. Ben asks who Charlotte is. His grandfather tells him that not even Carroll knew, because the Freemasons never left clear answers. He pulls out a $1 bill and shows him the symbols, the unfinished pyramid, the all-seeing eye. These are symbols that trace back to the Knights Templar, symbols that hide the answers about the treasure. But then, someone interrupts. It's Patrick, Ben's father. He orders the grandfather to stop filling his head with fantasies. That dollar in his hand is the entire Gates fortune. 6 generations chasing a goal that never existed. The grandfather replies that it was never about the money. With shining eyes, Ben asks, "Are we the Knights Templar?" His grandfather smiles. He asks him to kneel and solemnly says, "Benjamin Franklin Gates, you have chosen to take on the duty of the Templars, the Freemasons, and of the Gates family. Do you swear to uphold it?" The boy, emotional, nods. 30 years later, Ben is still searching for the treasure. He's in the Arctic, accompanied by his team, Riley, a tech genius, Ian, the millionaire funding the expedition, and Ian's men, armed thugs who are only there for the loot. They arrive at the marked location, but there's nothing. Still, Ben is convinced. He starts digging through the snow. Something makes a sound. He keeps digging until he finds a rusted plaque. He pours a bit of water on it, and there it is, Charlotte. They begin to clear the snow more vigorously, and they uncover it, a ship. This is where we can start to analyze. The movie talks about hidden symbols and a treasure protected by the Freemasons. And while it sounds like fiction, some parts do contain a grain of truth. For those who don't know, Freemasonry is a real secret society and is still active today in 2025. Over time, it's been linked to presidents, economic elites, political and military leaders, to revolutions, wars, and pacts that shape the course of history, even to symbols we see every day without realizing what they mean. The Freemasons have been surrounded by so much mystery that to understand them, we would have to go back to the beginning. Some say it goes back to Moses, others Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great, even Jesus, but they've also been linked to the Jesuits. But the most striking theory, and the one the film follows, is this: that the Freemasons are descendants of the Knights Templar. And who were they? During the Middle Ages, thousands of Christians from all over Europe made pilgrimages to Jerusalem. One of the most visited sites was the place where the Temple of Solomon had once stood. That temple was built by King Solomon, son of King David, to house the Ark of the Covenant, which contained the tablets of the Ten Commandments. That's why it was believed to be the most sacred place of all, because it was said that God dwelt there on earth. And although the temple was destroyed by the Babylonians in 587 BC, its location remains sacred, but getting there wasn't easy. The journey from Europe was full of bandits, wars, and conflicts between kingdoms and religions. Many pilgrims were robbed or killed before reaching their destination. To protect them, the Order of the Temple was founded, better known as the Knights Templar. They were called that because they established their base precisely where the Temple of Solomon once stood. The film and many popular legends suggest that, upon settling there, the Templars discovered that the Babylonians hadn't destroyed everything. That underground, hidden for centuries, something valuable remained, and that, in secret, the Templars began excavating beneath the temple ruins in search of the Ark, or perhaps something even greater. What's interesting is that this theory didn't come out of nowhere. Some historians have noted that during their early years in Jerusalem, the Templars kept an extremely low profile. They didn't accept new members. They barely engaged in military activity. And the strangest part is that there are no clear records of what they did between 1119 and 1129. This is odd because in that era, the church typically documented virtually everything of importance: the founding of religious orders, internal rules, donations, official letters, etc. So yes, it's suspicious that during those years, there's almost nothing about them. What were they really doing there? Why all the silence? And there's more. Over time, the Templars became incredibly wealthy. So much so that they lent money to kings and even created one of the first banking systems in Europe. Where did they get so much money? What if the treasure isn't just a legend? Very soon, we'll find out. Just a quick pause to say that if you're enjoying this video and haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. It would mean a lot and really helps me keep making more videos and content like this. Alright, let's get back to the story. They descend into the ship's hold. They're sure that this time, the treasure will finally be there. But there's no gold, no jewels, only barrels of gunpowder. Ben keeps exploring and finds something else, a corpse dressed like a captain, clutching a barrel in desperation. He uncovers a package with a box containing a meerschaum pipe. Ben examines it. It has an engraving carved into it. Ian grows impatient. Ben dismantles the pipe. He places a drop of blood on the stem and rolls it across a sheet of paper. And there it is, his next clue. The legend is written, the ink spread, the key contained in silence. 55 with an iron pen. Mr. Matlack will not offend. Ben tries to decipher it. The legend written. The key in silence. It's talking about a map, one that's hidden. The ink spread sounds like invisible ink. A map that can only be revealed with a special chemical. Mr. Matlack will not offend. Timothy Matlack was the official scribe of the Declaration of Independence, which was signed by 55 men. Everyone is stunned. The map is hidden inside the most important and most heavily protected document in the United States. The Declaration of Independence. Ian is certain they have to steal it, but Ben won't allow it. So for Ian, Ben is now nothing more than an obstacle. His thug, Shaw, pulls out a gun. Ben thinks fast. He lights an emergency flare, and with all the gunpowder on the ship, he triggers an explosion. Ian and his men run. They jump into the vehicles and escape. They only look back to see the ship explode. What they don't know is that Ben and Riley survived, and they won't let anyone steal the Declaration. They try to warn the FBI, but no one believes them. They go to the National Archives. While waiting to be seen, Ben flips through a pamphlet, an anniversary gala happening that very weekend. Dr. Abigail Chase receives them. Ben gets straight to the point. Someone is planning to steal the Declaration of Independence, but she just laughs. It's protected with maximum security. As they walk out, they pass by the document on display behind glass, and Ben makes a decision. If no one else is going to protect it, they'll have to do it themselves by stealing it first. The idea that there's a hidden map behind the Declaration of Independence sounds far-fetched, but listen to this. Several of the men who signed it were Freemasons. The movie says that there were 55 signers, but in fact, there were 56. It probably says 55 because Thomas McKean signed later and doesn't appear on many early copies. Of those 56, it's said that at least 9 were confirmed Freemasons, though some scholars suggest it could have been as many as 21. And some of them, like Ben Franklin, weren't just ordinary members, but key figures within Freemasonry. What did it actually mean to be a Mason? And why are they associated with secrets and hidden symbols? Although popular theory claims the Freemasons are direct descendants of the Knights Templar, in reality they have nothing to do with each other. They were two completely different groups. The Masons, at least in their origins, weren't wealthy knights. They were stonemasons. In fact, the word mason in English literally means stone builder or bricklayer. In the Middle Ages, almost the entire population lived on fiefs, land controlled by a noble. That noble, known as a feudal lord, allowed others to live on his land, but in exchange for labor. Many were peasants who paid him with a portion of their crops. And there were also blacksmiths, cobblers, bakers, and weavers. However, it didn't matter what your trade was, you couldn't leave. If you were born on that fief, that's where you stayed. But around the year 1100, plans began to emerge for the construction of the first Gothic cathedrals. And for that, specialists were needed. People capable of working stone, erecting massive structures, and designing complex details. That's how the trade of the Masons were born. They were highly skilled stoneworkers who mastered geometry, proportions, and precise calculations. In an era where almost no one could read, they possessed extremely advanced technological knowledge. For that reason, they were few and in high demand. Unlike others who were bound to a single fief, Masons moved from city to city, from kingdom to kingdom, building a cathedral here, a castle there. They weren't tied to any feudal lord. That's why they came to be known as Freemasons. Thus, being a Mason meant holding a special status. They could negotiate their own contracts, earn better wages, and because they worked on such important projects, they were often well connected with nobles, clergymen, and other influential men. They weren't rich, but they were respected, and they had access to circles that most laborers would never enter. Over time, those Masons began to organize themselves into closed groups to protect their craft. They trained apprentices, shared knowledge, and also looked out for each other. To keep their profession exclusive, they used secret signs, handshakes, passwords, and symbols. That way, they could recognize who was part of the group and who wasn't. It prevented anyone from pretending to be a Mason without having gone through the process. These groups, or lodges, were highly exclusive. One could only enter by recommendation and after meeting certain requirements. And since almost everything was passed down orally, it only added to the mystery that surrounded them. By the year 1500, many of the major construction projects had been completed, and with less demand for stonemasons, the lodges began to change. Starting in the 17th century, some began admitting honorary members, people who weren't builders, but who shared similar ideas about science, philosophy, and knowledge. That's when Masonry ceased to be a guild of builders and became a symbolic fraternity, one that would later play a role in events that forever changed the course of history. Ben and Riley begin their investigation. The declaration is surrounded by guards, cameras in every corner, bulletproof glass, thermal sensors that activate if anyone gets too close, and when it's not on display, it's lowered into an underground vault, with concrete walls over a meter thick. But there's an alternative, the restoration room, where documents are cleaned, repaired, and preserved, and it has far less security. That weekend will be the National Archives Anniversary Gala. The guards will be distracted, access will be looser, it'll be their best opportunity. They begin to prepare the plan. Riley enters the exhibition room and, using a laser pointer, activates the sensors that protect the document. The security team interprets it as a system failure and transfers the declaration to the restoration room. On the night of the gala, Ben infiltrates the building disguised as a janitor. He removes the uniform, revealing a tuxedo. He greets Abigail and offers her a glass of champagne. In a moment of distraction, he takes the glass and gets what he needs, her fingerprints, the key to accessing the restoration room. However, he's not the only one after the document. Ian and his men infiltrate through the sewers and air ducts. They break locks, force doors, they even electrocute a guard. Ben finds the declaration and heads toward the elevator. Ian and his men appear. They fire at him. He unscrews the display case and secures the document. Abigail begins to grow suspicious. She checks the guest list and realizes that Ben doesn't appear anywhere. Ben tries to leave through the gift shop, but the cashier stops him. What is he hiding? Ben pulls out his wallet and pays the $35 for the souvenir. Meanwhile, a security guard notices the broken locks. Ben gets out just in time, but he doesn't realize that Abigail is following him. She sees him carrying something and demands that he hand it over. And just then, security detects the theft. Abigail knows it was Ben, and she's not about to let him get away with it. He gives her the document and is about to drive off, but then he sees Ian and his men intercept Abigail. She refuses to hand over the document, so they force her into the car. Ben can't leave her with them. He follows. Ian manages to take the document from Abigail. Ben arrives just in time and gets her to safety. Ian, convinced he has won, unrolls the document and realizes it's nothing but a replica. A souvenir. Ben tricked them. Abigail demands answers. Ben tells her, "We warned you. Ian wanted to steal the declaration, and since no one believed us, we had to do it ourselves." They can finally try to reveal the treasure map. But to do that, they need the Silence Do-Good letters. Meanwhile, Agent Sadusky takes control of the investigation. He reviews the security footage and finds a key detail. A man tried to leave with the replica without paying. He paid with a credit card. The search for Ben Gates begins. Ben turns to the last person he would want to tell what he's doing, his father. He asks for the Silence Do-Good letters, a series of essays that Benjamin Franklin wrote when he was young, using that pseudonym. Ben Franklin and at least 8 others who signed the Declaration were Freemasons. George Washington, the first president, was as well. In fact, out of 45 US presidents, at least 15 have been Freemasons. What does this tell us? That Freemasonry has secretly controlled power all along? As we've seen, the Freemasons were a group with knowledge far beyond the average. They understood mathematics, architecture, and by traveling from one kingdom to another, they were exposed to different cultures and ways of thinking, giving them a much broader worldview. Additionally, by interacting with religious and political elites, they had access to debates, new ideas, and books that most people didn't even know existed. So, by the time cathedral building projects had come to an end, the Masons were no longer just builders. They'd become a network of educated men who spoke about science, philosophy, and freedom, something much closer to a circle of intellectuals. But in those times, that was dangerous. Power rested in the hands of absolute monarchs and the church, and questioning their authority was not only frowned upon, it was considered a crime. Even so, within their lodges, the Freemasons defended the idea that reason should prevail over blind obedience, that every person had the right to think for themselves. And since these ideas were seen as scandalous, they met in secret to discuss them. In 1738, Pope Clement XII issued a papal bull prohibiting Catholics from joining the Freemasons. He accused the group of being secretive, relativistic, and dangerous to the faith. From that point on, the Freemasons began to be seen as something dark, as if they were involved in evil or satanic practices, when in reality, many of them were simply educated men discussing ideas that were forbidden at the time. And that helps us understand why so many of the founding fathers of the US were Freemasons. It wasn't that Freemasonry had a secret plan to dominate the world. It was the opposite. Those meetings were among the few places where people could talk about liberty, democracy, and revolution. There, in those lodges, the idea of a country without kings, without nobility, was born. And it was the Freemasons who turned that idea into reality. The same thing happened in other parts of the world. Benito Juarez, the reformist president of Mexico, Simon Bolivar, the man who liberated half of South America, and many other leaders who transformed their countries were also Freemasons. But they didn't rise to power through a secret conspiracy. They did so because Freemasonry was one of the few places where they could imagine a different world. Now then, does that mean Freemasonry is something entirely noble and positive? Or has it also grown darker over time? Patrick realizes this is about the treasure and becomes furious. Why is he still chasing that madness? But Ben doesn't give up. He spreads the declaration out on the table. Carefully, he applies lemon juice to the back. Nothing appears. Patrick comments that it needs heat. They grab a hairdryer. The markings begin to reveal themselves. It's not a map, it's more clues. An Ottendorf cipher, a type of code that uses 3 numbers. Each number refers to page number, line number, and letter number. But to decode it, they need the key text, the Silence Do-Good letters. Patrick tells them he no longer has them. He donated them to the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. They head there immediately. They find a boy who can slip in unnoticed. They ask him to go into the exhibit and locate what they need. Each time he solves a piece of the code, he runs back to Riley and delivers the information. The message reads, "The vision to see the hidden treasure will be made clear when the dark shadow passes over the homes of Pass." Only one word is missing. The boy goes back in, but Ian, who's been tracking Ben, notices something suspicious. Why is a boy analyzing the Silence Do-Good letters? Riley tries to decode it. Pass and what? Then he gets it. Pass and stow. The inscription on the Liberty Bell. The boy finds the final words and runs back to Riley. Ian follows closely, but when he comes out, Riley is gone. He's with Ben and Abigail, working out the next step. The dark shadow passes over the home of Pass and Stow. The clue is in the shadow, but at what time? Ben has an idea. He pulls out a $100 bill. On it is an image of Independence Hall. They look at the clock tower. It shows a specific time, 2:22, and there are only a few minutes left. They run toward Independence Hall. U.S. currency, especially the $1 bill, contains symbols that many associate with Freemasonry. The most famous is the all-seeing eye above a pyramid. The person who approved that design was President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was a Freemason. But before jumping to conclusions, it's important to understand where that symbol actually comes from, because the Freemasons didn't invent it. Its origin dates back to ancient Egypt, where it was known as the Eye of Horus. The Egyptians used it as an amulet to ward off evil, attract health, and stay protected. Centuries later, in the Middle Ages, Christianity reappropriated the image and gave it new meaning. They placed it inside a triangle, representing the Holy Trinity, and added rays of light. That's how what we now know as the Eye of Providence was born, a symbol of God watching over the world with wisdom and justice. Freemasonry adopted this image because it aligned with one of its core ideas, the existence of a higher intelligence guiding the universe. They didn't associate it with any specific god, but rather with a more abstract force, the great architect of the universe, a way of representing reason, awareness, and the pursuit of knowledge. It wasn't a hidden or sinister symbol, but a way of honoring wisdom and free thought. When the U.S. won its independence in 1776, Congress commissioned the creation of a great seal for the new nation. They wanted something that would represent the country's founding values. After several attempts, the final design was proposed by Charles Thomson in 1782, an unfinished pyramid symbolizing a nation still under construction, and above it, the Eye of Providence. Was it included as a hidden Masonic symbol? Not exactly. The truth is, the eye had a meaning broad enough to resonate with everyone. For Christians, it represented God. For others, a higher power. And that was precisely what they needed, to show that, even without a king, the new nation still had divine backing. At the time, it was believed that kings ruled by divine right. So, if democracy was to be taken seriously, it also needed a symbol that offered the same sense of legitimacy. That's why they added the eye, and a Latin phrase, annuit coeptis, he has favored our undertakings, a way of saying, God is on our side. The Great Seal also includes another Latin phrase, Novus Ordo Seclorum, a new order of the ages. Some conspiracy theories claims that this refers to a new world order controlled by the Freemasons, but that's not the case. The phrase comes from a poem by Virgil and simply refers to the beginning of a new era, a country without kings or nobility, built on liberty and a completely new model of government. The fact that President Franklin Roosevelt approved placing that design on the $1 bill has nothing to do with him being a Mason. He simply chose to use the Great Seal of the United States, which had already existed for over 150 years. At first glance, we see the all-seeing eye, the pyramid, the Latin phrases, and the fact that Roosevelt was a Mason, and it may seem obvious that the Freemasons control the government and hide symbols and secret messages everywhere. But when you understand the full context, a simpler and more logical explanation emerges. Jumping to conclusions without context isn't something exclusive to conspiracy theorists. We all do it, and in a few moments we'll examine that. Ian intercepts the boy. He hands him a bill in exchange for the final word. Upon reading Stowe, he knows exactly where to go. Ben and the others climb up the bell tower. They observe the shadow being cast, and right at the point where it falls, they find a brick with a symbol engraved on it. Inside, he finds a pair of antique spectacles designed by Benjamin Franklin. They aren't ordinary glasses. They contain multiple colored lenses, blue, red, and green. They unroll the declaration, and looking through the lenses, a phrase appears, here at the wall. But something doesn't add up. Here is spelled with 3 E's. That must mean something more. Before they can analyze it, Ian catches up to them. He takes the declaration, and if that weren't enough, the FBI arrives too. Ben is arrested. Abigail and Riley need a plan. Sadusky interrogates Ben, and he tells him the truth. He didn't steal the declaration out of greed. He wanted to protect it. But Sadusky doesn't believe him. He picks up the glasses and begins playing with them. He lifts one of the colored lenses, and Ben realizes they work like filters. The phrase they had seen wasn't everything. Ben receives a call from Ian. He offers a deal. Meet and exchange. Ben will give him the information he discovered using the glasses, and in return, Ian will give back the declaration and the meerschaum pipe. Ben approaches the meeting point. One of Ian's men intercepts him, but instead of carrying out the exchange, he reveals that Abigail made a deal with them. They have a plan to help him escape. He has to jump into the river. Ben obeys and manages to flee the police underwater. They analyze the clue, here at the wall. Ben remembers that a long time ago, where Wall Street stands today, there was a wall built by Dutch settlers for defense. The main entrance to that wall was on a street called Here. Over time, that street was renamed Broadway. So, the clue leads them to a specific spot, the corner of Wall Street and Broadway. Ben shares the information and tries to leave, but Ian stops him. He knows Ben is still hiding something. To pressure him, he reveals they're holding his father, Riley, and Abigail hostage. Ben has no choice. The clue doesn't only point to that intersection, it also leads to Trinity Church, right next to it. There, they open the declaration and use the special lenses. By shifting the colored filters, a new message appears. Beneath Parkington Lane. They investigate and discover that Parkington Lane isn't a street, it's a person, a crypt inside the church. They open it and find that it leads to a passageway. They move forward until they reach an old hoist system, meaning the treasure lies underground. They descend in the lift. At last, they arrive, and it's empty. There's only a lantern, nothing else. Ian grows impatient. He pressures Ben. What is he hiding? Ben says nothing. Then Ian rides the lift back up and issues a threat. If Ben doesn't tell the truth, he'll leave them trapped down there. Patrick steps in. The lantern is the clue, he says. In Boston's Old North Church, Thomas Newton hung a lantern in the steeple to warn that the British were coming. Ian, satisfied with the answer, breaks his promise. He goes up in the elevator and leaves them locked in. But that was exactly what Ben and Patrick wanted. They needed him out of the way because they're sure the treasure is still there. They just need to find the door. So then, does the treasure of the Knights Templar really exist? The Templars did become incredibly wealthy in a very short time, but not because they found buried gold, rather for 4 very specific reasons. First, because they received many donations. Kings, nobles, and even peasants gave them land, castles, livestock, and money to support their mission of protecting pilgrims. Of course, not all of it was pure generosity. At the time, it was believed that donating to the church helped purify your soul. Second, the Knights Templar were exempt from paying taxes. While other lords owed dues to the king or the church, they could accumulate property without anyone touching their wealth. Third, they were incredibly productive. They didn't just hold land as a symbol, they put it to work. They built mills, cultivated vineyards, raised livestock, and sold their goods across Europe. And fourth, since they already had so much wealth and were such good administrators, they came up with something else. They offered loans to kings, nobles, and anyone in need. But the most impressive thing is that they created a financial system that was extremely advanced for its time. If someone wanted to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, they could leave their money in Paris and collect it there using a coded note. It's no surprise they became so wealthy. And as for the mystery of what the Templars were doing during their early years in Jerusalem, there's also a simple explanation. The order was founded in 1119, but it wasn't officially recognized by the church until 1129. That's why there are very few records from that initial decade. Not because they were secretly digging for treasure, but because they didn't yet exist in any formal capacity. Sometimes, when there are information gaps, the mind tends to fill them with assumptions. We take loose pieces, arrange them as best we can, and build theories that sound logical, even if they aren't. And this doesn't just happen with history, it happens to us every day. We take 2 or 3 bits of information, fill in the blanks with our own ideas, and take it as truth. If someone doesn't greet us, we assume they don't like us. If they don't reply to a message, they must be angry. We build our own theories, small, personal ones, but just as uncertain. And we don't only use them to judge others, we use them to define ourselves. I'm not good at this. I'll never be lucky in love. I'll always mess things up. And in doing so, we end up living within beliefs we've never questioned, without asking ourselves if what we're assuming actually has any foundation. What theories are you telling yourself? Are they based on real information? Or on fear, insecurity, and assumptions? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Ben sees a symbol in the stone, the all-seeing eye. The same one his grandfather told him about as a child. He presses a hidden button and a door opens. They move forward with hope. They enter a new secret chamber, but there's nothing. Someone got there first and took everything. Ben is silent. He looks at his father and says, "You were right. This was all a waste." But Patrick replies, "No, I was wrong. This room is real, which means the treasure is real too. You did it, Ben. You found it." They begin to look for a way out, and then they find a hollow in the wall. With a familiar shape, Ben connects the pieces. The secret lies with Charlotte. He takes out the pipe and disassembles it. He fits in the bowl. It fits perfectly. He inserts the stem, turns it, and with that, a passageway opens. They can't believe it. They enter, and now at last, there it is. The treasure, Egyptian relics, Roman sculptures, gold from the Crusades, and much more. Ben calls Sadusky. He hands over the declaration and tells him he found the treasure, but doesn't want to keep any of it. He only asks not to go to prison. Sadusky replies, the Templars and the Freemasons believed this treasure was too great for one man, even for a king. Ben looks at him, surprised. Then he notices something, his ring with a Masonic symbol. Today, Freemasons still exist, though they're no longer as secretive as they once were. They have lodges in many countries and even have a website, in case someone wants to apply. Rather than being a society that manipulates the world from the shadows, modern lodges function more like philosophical and philanthropic clubs. They are groups of men who meet to discuss philosophy, ethics, history, politics, and in many cases, also carry out charitable work. Some lodges have foundations that support hospitals, educational programs, or social causes. There are even lodges that host public events. So no, they don't seem like a dark group serving evil. Now, if you go deep into the corners of the internet, you'll start to find other versions. People claiming their grandfathers were Freemasons and insisting that everything is far more sinister. Secret rituals, power pacts, and hidden symbols to manipulate the masses. But before jumping to conclusions, there are 3 important things to consider. First, when you examine those stories closely, there's rarely any concrete evidence, no documents, no credible witnesses, just vague, anonymous accounts told with great emotion and mystery, but no solid proof behind them. Second, just because someone experienced something strange doesn't necessarily mean it actually was. Perception doesn't always reflect reality. If someone already believed in witchcraft, demons, or conspiracies before joining, it's easy to see everything through that lens. What to one person is a philosophical symbol, to another may seem sinister. The mind tends to see what it expects to find. And third, even if that person's experience was real, it doesn't represent all of Freemasonry. Each lodge operates independently. Judging the entire organization based on what happened in a single lodge is like saying that because one priest committed a crime, the entire church is corrupt. Such generalizations are unfair and, above all, inaccurate. There's an argument many people repeat to reinforce these accusations, and it centers around a specific book, Morals and Dogma, written by Albert Pike, one of the most influential Freemasons of the 19th century. They claim this book is required reading for anyone who joins Freemasonry, and that in its pages, Pike mentions Lucifer, even going so far as to assert that the great architect of the universe is actually Satan in disguise. It's best to approach these claims with critical thinking, because when you investigate a little further, you find something very different. Morals and Dogma is not a required text. For a time, it was given as a gift to those entering a particular rite, but that's no longer the case. Today, it's simply a book written by a philosopher expressing his personal views. Pike himself clarifies that he's not speaking on behalf of all Freemasonry, but in his own name. The book is not a ritual manual or a sacred text, but a philosophical and symbolic work in which Pike attempts to explain what Freemasonry represents from his own perspective. He draws on many references, and yes, he does mention Lucifer, but he doesn't present him as a figure to be worshipped, nor as some secret god of the Freemasons. He refers to Lucifer within a reflection on good and evil, using him as a symbol of the struggle between light and darkness. So, is Freemasonry something dark? The evidence suggests otherwise. It appears rather to be an organization which, due to its age, its use of symbols, and a certain degree of exclusivity, has generated curiosity, inspired many stories, and also been widely misunderstood. Ben and Sadusky agree that the treasure doesn't belong to them, it's the heritage of humanity. They decide to distribute it across museums around the world. Sadusky arrests Ian and allows Ben and Riley to keep a small percentage of the treasure's value, enough for Riley to buy a sports car, and for Ben, a mansion. And that's not all Ben gained. He also began a relationship with Abigail. So now, what do you believe about the Freemasons? Do you think they're hiding something? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for staying until the end of the video. Don't forget to subscribe and share it with a friend who you think might enjoy it. And you and I'll see you in the next one.